Welcome again, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Niger Innis Presents the Trump Revolution, a part of the TvAbraham network. Well, folks, I am blushing. You can't tell because I'm chocolate color, but I am blushing, and then I'm blushing because I'm so thrilled and pleased to have on an intellectual titan of our country, and I would say the premier intellectual defending and promoting and teaching about Western civilization. Of course, I'm talking about Victor Davis Hanson, who is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and chairs the working group on the role of military history in contemporary conflict. He is an American scholar of ancient and modern warfare and has been, you all know, you've seen him dozens of times on Fox TV and other various Newsmax and other various media outlets. He's a professor emeritus of classics at California State University, Fresno, and the annual Wayne and Marcia Busk Distinguished Visiting Fellow in History at the Great Hillsdale College. Victor, I could probably take up the whole half hour that we have with you on just reading your bio. There's so much more. You've been awarded by presidents of the United States and by the elite in intelligentsia in America. Welcome to the program, my friend.
Thank you for having me, Niger.
It is my pleasure and honor. Victor, we have gone through tremendous and horrendous 2 years in the Middle East, all around the world, but in particular the Middle East, in particular Israel and Gaza. And what a difference 2 years make. 2 years ago, Israel was the victim of one of the most brutal attacks in the century. In fact, I would argue the most brutal attack, purposeful attack on civilians in this century. Of course, we're talking about the October 7th massacre. 2 years later, Israel has chopped off the leadership of Hezbollah. They have decimated Hamas. They haven't finished the job just yet, but they have decimated Hamas. And perhaps, of course, they smack around the Houthis every now and then. But perhaps most importantly, the fountainhead of all this terror in the Middle East and around the world, Iran, its nuclear program, with the great assistance of the United States military, has been decimated and pushed back a year, 2 years, maybe as much as 5 years. So Israel right now is the center point of economic and military power in the Middle East. And it is quite a different place we're in today than we were back then. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. It's only a nation of 10 and a half, 11 million people, and it's surrounded by 500 million Arabs. It's quite remarkable that this tiny little country in a sea of Arabs and Muslims has had such dynamic success militarily, socially, economically, politically. And I guess the key is that the prior administration had daylight between us and Israel. And whenever that happens, its enemies become emboldened and they take risks that they shouldn't. And in this case, the Biden administration after October 11th kind of contextualized the example. I mean, the terrorism, and we had all of these campus unrest. And whether they knew it or not, they were transmitting the message that if you attacked Israel or you were going to create a ring of fire, it would be okay with the United States. And that was part of the problem. So, Hamas had 7,000 rockets. The Hezbollah had 150,000. The Houthis had 20,000. Iran had 15 very sophisticated rockets, more drones. And they all thought that if they hit Israel, there would not be consequences. At least the United States might slow walk supplies or something. And that, given what happened in Afghanistan, given the Ukraine war, that's had also eroded U.S. deterrence. And so that had to be reestablished. And that was reestablished when the Trump administration came in and said there is no target in the Middle East that's off limits, either for us or for Israel. And we had this conversation, Niger, of course, when you referenced the attack 2 years ago. We were told that Hezbollah was sort of like the Waffen SS of the Middle East. 10,000 stormtroopers, they're indomitable. You can't
I
touch them.
remember that.
Yes, they're fierce, they're ferocious. Lebanon is the graveyard of the IDF, and of course, Syria and the Assad dynasty has been there for a half century, and it's a Russian protectorate. You don't dare go into there. The Russians are there. The Chinese are protecting the Iranians. You can't stop the bomb. This was the labyrinth will protect the subterranean labyrinth will protect Hamas, etc., etc. And now, as 2 years later, we find out that Hezbollah was never that fierce. That Israel, both with this uncanny pager attack and communications attack, destroyed its command and control. We were told Nasrallah was off limits. They took him out. They took out the command and control in Iran. They took out the top physicists. They took out the facilities. And everybody had warned us they can't do that. They're unable to do that, or they're going to cause an inferno in the Middle East, or they're going to bring down an American presidency. And none of that. All we had lived with these fables and mythologies for so long. It was just self-defeating. It was paralysis. And then all of a sudden, the Netanyahu government and the Trump administration said, we don't accept any of these preconditions. Everything is going to be empirical. And they just started with a new page, and they got a new cast of actors. And I think the Middle East, one of the problems in the Middle East was that Joe Biden had insulted our traditional allies. He had insulted Netanyahu. Obama had leaked out that he had called Netanyahu a chicken blank. They had said the Saudis, whatever you think of the Saudis, the Bidens had said they were a pariah state. They didn't want to do business with us. And Trump came in and he said, I'm not going to prejudge anybody, Arab or Jewish. I'm going to find support. But to have that support for a peace process, certain things have to happen. The people who are obstacles to peace either have to be eliminated or defeated. And that's what happened.
It is amazing, and it is a testament to Israeli technology and the guts that it takes to
Yes.
cut against the politically correct dominated world or so-called international community. All right, so Israel now is the dominant hegemon, certainly economically, certainly militarily as well. What does this mean for the singular? I mean, of course, we have the recent Trump achievement of his 20-point plan being accepted by the Israelis and by elements of Palestinian leadership. I don't know if it's Hamas, Palestinian Authority, combination of both. But whatever the case may be, it does seem to be accepted by all sides, including the very important Arab allies that we have in the region that are putting the pressure on Hamas to accept the Trump 20-point plan. But before, of course, the 20-point plan, you had the historic Abraham Accords that I would argue is a passing of the baton from the Jordanian Israeli peace in the early 90s, which I also submit was a passing of the baton of the first historic and almost like the foundation of peace with Israel and its Arab neighbors, which of course is Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin's historic accord, the Egypt-Israeli peace treaty, which, by the way, has amazingly held for more than 4 decades, which is incredible. What does this mean for the future of the Abraham Accords? Before October 7th, there was talk of the Saudis coming in. There was talk of Indonesia coming in. This was truly going to be a golden age of peace between Israel and her neighbors.
Yeah, I think there's a much better chance for a variety of reasons. The Arab world and Israel as well had tired sort of professional diplomats. They talked to certain diplomatees, and especially on the Biden side, they felt that whatever guarantees they would offer would not be fulfilled. They'd seen what happened in the Ukraine war. They'd seen Biden's remarks that if Putin invaded Ukraine, our reaction would depend on whether it was a minor invasion or not. They saw the skedaddle from Afghanistan, the $50 billion left. And so they didn't feel comfortable with making any commitments to that particular administration. And they felt, more importantly, why should they go out on a limb when they weren't sure, number one, that we were a strong backer of Israel? So why should they back Israel or partner with Israel when its Western patron might not be as confident in the Israeli partnership as even the Arabs? And then more importantly, when you talk to people from the Middle East, from these governments in the Gulf especially, but Egypt and Jordan, as you mentioned, there was also a sense that they did not want to put their neck in a guillotine. In other words, they thought, well, if we're going to take risk, and we have Shia populations, we have radical Sunni populations among our demographies, and we say that we're going to sign up with the Israelis and we're going to recognize them, then who's going to deal with Hamas? We want them gone because they pose threats to all established government in the Middle East, and we can't do it because it's politically impossible for us to side with a Jewish state or a Western power against a radical Arab Muslim entity.
They would pay the price for it on the what they call the Arab street.
Yes, absolutely. So they said to us, if we join in or support or guarantee the financial mechanisms to rebuild Gaza, somebody has to take care of Hamas. And it can't be us, but we might even have to criticize the person who takes care of Hamas, at least publicly. But privately, we will not participate unless they're not involved or they're
Well,
eliminated.
that point you make, like many of your points, is profound because the current state of things, the one hiccup, there are many, I'm sure, but one hiccup that I think is quite pointed is that none of the Arab or Turks, the allies, have pledged to be a part of that management, leadership, policing structure in a new Gaza has stepped up to the plate. And they said that they will not step up to the plate because they don't believe that Hamas has been sufficiently dealt with.
Yes, and I think so. What we are now is, I think the Trump administration. I'm not saying they knew in advance, but they roundly condemned the Israeli attack on Doha, in a vain effort to wipe out more of the vestigial elements of Hamas. But nevertheless, once the United States publicly condemned that and made Netanyahu apologize, more importantly, they told, I suppose, the Doha leadership in Qatar said to the United States, this could happen again. The United States pretty much said, yes, it could. Sometimes we can't restrain Israel if you're going to have Hamas killers in your. So they wanted protection. They weren't going to get it from the other Arabs who don't like them. The Iranians who they double deal with were impotent. And so basically we had leverage over them. And I think we said, you can no longer harbor Hamas leadership. We said the same thing with Turkey. You want to be a participant in the F-35 program. You still want American nuclear weapons on your soil to give you to do. All of these things are conditional on you stopping your sanctuary and help and aid of Hamas. And so I think that's what we're watching now, that the United States is trying to prune back support for Hamas, sanctuary for Hamas, the banking system for Hamas, the domestic support on our campuses for Hamas, and that will allow Israel then to gradually create or expand. I think they have 58% that they're occupying now, but gradually, slowly, as things calm down in their sectors, people are fed, life returns to normal, they can expand that perimeter till they squeeze them out. And then the Egyptians, the Jordanians, will not let them participate. And I think that's the only thing that will ensure the peace. You cannot deal with Hamas. They're killers. They get up every morning thinking we've got to destroy Israel and kill Jews. They go to bed every night thinking they didn't do enough. So I think that's what everybody's talking about. And then I think what's new about it is the Arab world, the moderate Arab world, the neutral or even pro-Western Arab world has confidence that if they take risk, that this administration, whether it's on matters of energy, on tariffs, on military sales, will support them. And therefore, they won't be out in front of the United States when suddenly the Trump administration says, well, you know what? We don't approve of your human rights, or that gays are not treated well, we're going to, or women, something like that. Not that those are not important issues, but they just don't want that attitude from the United States anymore if they're going to partner with them. And
Perfectly understandable.